I stepped into my grandmother's house, the familiar scent of aged wood and dust wrapping around me like an old blanket. The house had always held a certain magic, a blend of memories and whispers of the past. As I walked through the dimly lit hallway, the floorboards creaked beneath my feet, each sound echoing stories long forgotten. I paused for a moment, letting the nostalgia wash over me. I could almost hear my grandmother's laughter, the warmth of her presence filling the air. "Lucas, dear, come help me with the cookies," her voice would call, sweet and inviting, urging me to the kitchen. But today, I was here alone, drawn by an inexplicable pull towards the past. I made my way to the small study, a room I had always found intriguing yet slightly intimidating. It was filled with books and trinkets from a time before my own. As I scanned the room, my eyes landed on a dusty shelf in the corner, seemingly untouched by time. There, amidst the clutter, I spotted an old album, its leather cover cracked and faded. Curiosity ignited within me. What could it contain? I reached for the album, the weight of it surprising as I pulled it from the shelf. Dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through the window, and I felt a thrill of anticipation. As I opened it, the musty smell of aged paper wafted up, mingling with the memories of my childhood. The first few pages were filled with sepia-toned photographs, capturing moments of joy and celebration. My heart swelled as I recognized faces. My grandparents, my mother as a child, distant relatives who I had only heard stories about. But as I turned the pages, a sense of unease began to creep in. There it was, lurking in the background of each photo, a shadowy figure. At first, I dismissed it as a trick of the light or perhaps a flaw in the old photographs. But the more I looked, the more I felt a chill run down my spine. The figure seemed to follow my grandmother, its presence contrasting starkly with the bright smiles and laughter captured in the images. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice barely breaking the silence of the room. I flipped to a picture of my grandmother as a young woman, her smile radiant and full of life. Yet, behind her, that shadow loomed larger, its edges indistinct but undeniably present. My heart raced as I traced my finger over the image, my mind swirling with questions. I closed the album, my heart pounding. "I need to know," I murmured to myself. What secrets were hidden in these pages? What darkness had my family faced? The shadow seemed to call to me, a mystery begging to be unraveled. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. The air felt thick with anticipation, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to uncover the truth. I glanced around the room, my gaze landing on the family portraits hanging on the walls. They seemed to watch me, their eyes filled with untold stories, their smiles tinged with sorrow. "Grandma," I called softly, half expecting her to appear. "What did you experience?" But the room remained silent, the only sound being the distant ticking of a clock. I could almost hear the echoes of laughter and tears that had filled the space over the years. Determined, I opened the album again, this time with a more analytical eye. I flipped through the pages, pausing at each photograph. I needed to understand what had happened, what had led to that shadow. Each image felt like a puzzle piece, and I was determined to fit them together. "Maybe Mom knows something," I thought aloud, my mind racing. I needed answers, and I knew my mother would have some insight into the family's past. I closed the album carefully, placing it back on the shelf, the weight of the mystery resting heavily on my shoulders. As I made my way back to the living room, I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was alive with memories, each corner holding its breath, waiting for me to listen. I found my mother in the kitchen, her back turned to me as she stirred something on the stove. "Mom, can I ask you something?" I ventured, my voice hesitant. She turned, her expression shifting from concentration to curiosity. "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" I hesitated, unsure of how to broach the subject. "I found an old album in Grandma's study. It has pictures of her when she was young, and there's something strange in them." Her brow furrowed, a shadow passing over her face. "Strange how?" "There's a shadow in every photo, behind her. I don't know what it is, but it feels unsettling. Do you know anything about it? My mother sighed, the tension in her shoulders apparent. Your grandmother had a complicated past, Lucas. There were things she never talked about, things that were painful. Like what? I pressed, my curiosity piqued. She turned away, her gaze drifting to the window. There was an incident, a fire. It was in 1967. It destroyed the house your great-grandmother lived in. It was a terrible tragedy. A fire. I echoed, the pieces beginning to shift in my mind. What happened? I don't know all the details, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But it left scars on the family. It was said that some made choices that haunted us. What kind of choices? I asked, my heart racing. She hesitated, the weight of unspoken words heavy in the air. There were rumors of a pact, something that was made to protect the family, but at a terrible cost. A pact. I repeated, the word tasting foreign on my tongue. What did it involve? My mother shook her head, her expression pained. I don't want to talk about this, Lucas. It's in the past for a reason. But I need to know. That shadow in the photos, I feel like it's connected to all of this. She turned to face me, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and sadness. Sometimes it's better to let the past stay buried. We can't change what happened. We can only move forward. I took a deep breath, frustration boiling within me. I can't just ignore it, Mom. I need to understand. If that shadow is part of our family history, then I have to confront it. Please, don't dig deeper, she pleaded, her voice cracking. You might not like what you find, but I felt a fire igniting inside me. I have to know. I can't let this go. I left the kitchen, my heart pounding in my chest. The shadow was calling me, and I couldn't turn my back on it. I needed answers, and I was determined to uncover the truth, even if it meant facing the darkness that lingered in my family's past. As I returned to the old album, I felt a sense of purpose. The shadows wouldn't stay hidden for long. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the dusty windows of my grandmother's old house, I felt a mixture of nostalgia and unease wash over me. The familiar scent of aged wood and musty books filled the air, wrapping around me like an old, forgotten embrace. Each creak of the floorboards beneath my feet reminded me of countless childhood visits. But today was different. Today, I was here on a mission, fueled by an unsettling curiosity that had been ignited by a mysterious album I had stumbled upon in the attic. I walked cautiously into the dimly lit living room, the light from a single lamp illuminating the corners where darkness lingered. My eyes scanned the shelves, laden with trinkets and family heirlooms that had not seen the light of day in years. It was then that I noticed it. A large, dusty album perched precariously on a shelf, almost as if it were waiting for me. I reached out, my fingers grazing the cover, and felt a shiver of anticipation. As I opened the album, the musty scent of old photographs wafted up, mixing with the smell of dust. The pages were yellowed, the edges frayed, but what struck me most were the images within. Each photo seemed to tell a story, but there was something unsettling about them. A figure, no, a shadow loomed behind the subjects in every picture, a dark presence that sent a chill down my spine. I flipped through the pages, my heart racing, each image more haunting than the last. Then, I stumbled upon a photograph of my grandmother as a young woman. She was radiant, her smile bright, but there, just behind her, was that same shadow, a nebulous form that seemed to taunt me, whispering secrets long buried. My heart pounded as I felt an overwhelming urge to understand what I was seeing. Who or what was that shadow? And why was it always lurking in the background, haunting my family's history? I closed the album, my mind racing with questions. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. The following day, I decided to delve into my family's past, hoping to uncover the truth behind the shadow that had now become an obsession. I started scouring the internet for any records or stories that might link my family to tragedies or strange events. Hours turned into days as I pored over old newspapers and genealogy websites, tracing my lineage like a detective on a case. I learned about distant relatives, some of whom I had never even heard of, and the more I dug, the more I felt a connection to them. But there was something else, a heaviness that began to settle in my chest as I stumbled upon whispers of sorrow, deaths, accidents, and inexplicable occurrences that seemed to plague my family line. It was during one of those late-night research sessions that I decided to call my mother. I had hesitated at first, not wanting to alarm her, but my curiosity had grown too powerful to contain. "Mom," I began, my voice tinged with uncertainty. "Can we talk about Grandma? I found something in her old album." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear her thoughts racing, the memories being sifted through. "What album, Lucas?" she finally asked, her tone cautious. "The one with the photos. There's this shadow in every picture, and I can't shake the feeling that it's connected to our family somehow. I need to know if anything strange or tragic has happened to us." She sighed heavily, and I could sense the weight of her memories pressing down on her. "Honey, there are things in our family history that are better left unspoken. But I need to know, Mom. Please." My voice was more insistent now, a plea for understanding. After a long silence, she relented. "Fine. There was an incident, a fire, in 1967. It destroyed your great-grandmother's house. It was a terrible tragedy. We lost a lot that day." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Was anyone hurt? Did something happen that we don't know about?" Her voice trembled slightly. "It was devastating. The family was never the same after that. Some say it was a curse, a result of decisions made generations ago. But I don't want to dwell on those things, Lucas. It's in the past." "But Mom, the shadow in the photos, it's like it's tied to our family's history. I can't just ignore it." My heart raced as I connected the dots in my mind. The fire, the shadow, the tragedies. It all felt intertwined. I don't want to scare you. Some stories are better forgotten." Her voice was tight, and I could sense her reluctance to share more. "Please, I need to know," I urged, feeling a sense of urgency that I couldn't explain. "All right," she finally said, her voice softening. "Just promise me you'll be careful. There are things that some of us would rather keep buried." After our conversation, I felt both empowered and haunted. The fire was a pivotal moment in my family's history, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadow was somehow linked to that tragedy. I began to trace a map of events in my family's past, marking down dates, names, and occurrences that seemed relevant. As I worked, I couldn't help but wonder what would happen if I continued to dig deeper. Would I uncover something that should have remained hidden? Or would I find the answers I so desperately sought? The idea of confronting whatever lingered in the shadows of my family history was daunting, yet I felt a strange sense of purpose. I would unravel this mystery, no matter the cost. Each revelation brought me closer to understanding the shadow, and I felt an insatiable urge to continue. The more I unraveled, the more I felt that the past was not just a series of events, but a living entity that demanded to be acknowledged. I was determined to face it head-on. As sunbeams filtered through the dusty windows of my grandmother's old house, casting elongated shadows across the wooden floor, the familiar scent of aged wood and the faint hint of lavender lingered in the air, bringing back memories of childhood visits spent in this sanctuary of nostalgia. I walked cautiously, my fingers brushing against the worn furniture, each piece echoing stories untold. This house, once alive with laughter and warmth, now felt like a mausoleum of forgotten moments. I made my way to the living room, where the shelves were lined with knickknacks and family heirlooms. My heart raced as my eyes landed on a dusty album perched precariously on the top shelf, half hidden behind an old vase. Curiosity piqued. I reached for it, the weight of the album feeling heavier than it should have. As I opened it, a cloud of dust erupted into the air, and I coughed, waving my hand in front of my face. Flipping through the pages, I was greeted by faded photographs, each capturing a fragment of time long past. But with each turn, a chill crept up my spine. In every image, there was a figure, a nebulous shadow lurking just out of focus. It was as if this darkness had been woven into the fabric of our family history, an ominous presence haunting joyful moments. I felt a shiver of unease as I continued to flip through the pages. Then, I paused, my breath hitching in my throat as I landed on a photo of my grandmother in her youth. She was radiant, her smile bright and full of life. Yet, behind her, the shadow loomed larger than in the others, an indistinct silhouette that seemed to swallow the light surrounding her. I leaned closer, trying to comprehend the juxtaposition of her joy and the ominous presence that tainted it. Who or what was this shadow, and what did it want? I felt a sudden urgency welling up inside me. I had to know more about my family's past. This wasn't just a collection of pictures. It was a puzzle waiting to be solved, and the piece I was missing might very well explain the darkness that tainted our lineage. My heart raced with the thrill of the chase, an instinctive need to peel back the layers of mystery that had enveloped my family for generations. Determined to uncover the truth, I dove into the depths of my family's history. I spent hours scouring through old records, letters, and newspaper clippings, piecing together a narrative that had long been shrouded in silence. I started with a conversation with my mother, hoping she could illuminate the shadows that had begun to engulf me. "Mom," I began hesitantly, sitting across from her at the kitchen table. "Do you remember anything about Grandma's past? About, well, the family history? Anything strange?" She looked up from her cup of tea, her brow furrowing slightly as though she were summoning memories from a distant place. "Why do you ask, Lucas?" "I found an old album in the house," I replied, holding my breath as I gauged her reaction. "There's something in the photos, a shadow. I feel like it's connected to something deeper." Her eyes darkened, and she hesitated. "There are things in our family's past that are better left unspoken. Sometimes it's easier to let sleeping dogs lie." "Please, Mom," I pressed. "I need to know. Was there anything tragic? Anything that might explain what I saw?" Finally, after a long pause, she sighed. "There was an incident, an awful fire that destroyed your great-grandmother's house back in 1967. It was a terrible time for the family." The words hung heavy in the air between us. I could feel my pulse quickening. The fire, could it be connected to the shadow? "What happened?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She shook her head, her face etched with pain. "I don't know all the details, just that it left a scar on our family that never healed. Your great-grandmother lost everything." I could almost see the gears turning in my mind, connecting dots that had long been obscured. The fire, the shadow, the tragedies, there had to be a link. I needed to map out these events to understand how they fit together. With fervor, I began to outline the timeline of tragedies that seemed to plague my family. Each incident felt like a thread in a tapestry of sorrow, one that I was determined to unravel. I scribbled notes, creating a visual representation of the events that had shaped our lineage. It was then that I felt a sudden urge to seek out others who might share my thirst for understanding. That's when I stumbled upon a workshop on genealogy at the local community center. It felt like the perfect opportunity to delve deeper into my family's past while possibly meeting others who shared similar interests. On the day of the workshop, I entered the room filled with anticipation. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement as people mingled, discussing their own discoveries and family trees. I felt a flutter of nerves as I took a seat in the back, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. That's when I noticed her, Molly. She had a presence that drew my attention immediately. Her dark hair framed her face, and her expressive eyes sparkled with determination. She was animatedly discussing her own family history with another participant, and I couldn't help but be intrigued. After the introduction, we were encouraged to share our stories. I found myself gravitating toward Molly as we exchanged our findings. "So, you're also into genealogy?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Yes," she replied, her enthusiasm infectious. "I've been digging into my family history for months. It's fascinating, but can also get a bit dark." I nodded, feeling an instant connection. "I know what you mean. I recently found something unsettling in my family's past. There's this shadow in the photos of my grandmother, and I think it's tied to an old fire that affected our family." Her brow furrowed in interest. "A shadow? That sounds eerie. I've come across some strange stories too. My family has its own share of tragedies. As we continued to talk, I could feel the tension and attraction building between us. It was as if we were two pieces of a puzzle, drawn together by our shared quest for truth. Our discussions flowed seamlessly, and the more we talked, the more I felt like I had found an ally in my journey. Maybe we should team up, Molly suggested, a spark of excitement in her eyes. Two heads are better than one, right? We could explore archives together, share our findings. I couldn't help but smile at the idea. That sounds like a plan. I could use a partner in this. As we exchanged contact information, I felt a sense of thrill. This was more than just a research project. It felt like the beginning of something significant. Together, we could delve into the shadows of our families, uncovering truths that had been buried for too long. In the days that followed, Molly and I spent hours poring over historical documents and family trees. We shared our discoveries, and with each revelation, our bond deepened. However, there was an underlying tension that seemed to grow as we uncovered more about our respective families. When I think about your shadow, Molly said one evening, her brow furrowed in thought, it makes me realize how interconnected our histories might be. What if our families are linked in some way? I nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. It's possible. We both seem to have experienced tragedies that ripple through generations. It makes me wonder how we can break this cycle. The more we discussed, the closer we became. Yet, as our chemistry intensified, I could feel the pressure mounting. The mysteries we were chasing were taking their toll on me, and I found myself torn between my growing feelings for Molly and the weight of my family's dark legacy. Moments of laughter and shared dreams were often juxtaposed with the grim realities we unearthed. There were nights I lay awake, haunted by the shadow that loomed over my family history and the fear that it might extend to my present and to Molly. As I delved deeper into the past, I realized that the figure in my grandmother's photos and the tragedies that plagued my lineage were not just distant memories. They were specters that threatened to consume me. I felt an urgency to confront these ghosts, not just for my sake but for Molly's too, as we navigated the murky waters of our intertwined destinies. My heart raced as I envisioned the journey ahead, one that would lead us to answers, and perhaps to each other. The shadows of our past beckoned, and I was determined to face them, even if it meant unearthing secrets that had long been buried. As I stood in the dimly lit living room of my grandmother's old house, the air was thick with the scent of aged wood and dust. The creaking floorboards beneath my feet seemed to echo the whispers of countless stories that had unfolded within these walls. I glanced around, my heart racing with a mix of nostalgia and curiosity. This was a place filled with memories, but it also felt like a vault of secrets waiting to be uncovered. My gaze landed on a dusty shelf in the corner, where an album lay, half hidden behind a stack of yellowed books. I approached it cautiously, brushing off the dust with the back of my hand. The album felt heavy, as if it held not just photographs but the weight of history. I opened it, the pages crackling under my touch, revealing a treasure trove of family memories frozen in time. But as I began to flip through the pages, a chill swept over me. In every photograph, a shadowy figure lurked in the background, indistinct yet undeniably present. My heart raced as I felt an inexplicable unease. Who was this figure? What did it mean? I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching me, a silent witness to our family's joys and sorrows. Then, I landed on a photo of my grandmother when she was young. She was radiant, her smile lighting up the frame, but behind her, the shadow loomed larger than ever. It was as if the figure was reaching out, trying to pull her into its darkness. The contrast between her vibrant spirit and the ominous presence sent a shiver down my spine. I couldn't just ignore this. I needed to know more. Who was this shadow, and what role had it played in our family's history? The days that followed were consumed by my obsession with uncovering the truth. I dove into the history of my family, sifting through old documents and stories. I scoured the internet for any mention of tragedies or strange occurrences that could be linked to the figure in the photographs. Every day, I spent hours in libraries, lost in a sea of records and newspaper clippings. During one of my research sessions, I decided to speak with my mother about our family's past. I found her in the kitchen, her hands busy kneading dough for dinner, the familiar aroma of spices filling the air. "Mom," I began, my voice tentative. "Can I ask you about Grandma's family? I found something in an old album." She paused, her hands stilled for a moment, and I saw the flicker of hesitation in her eyes. "What did you find?" I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "There are these strange shadows in the photos, and I think there might be something more to our family's history." "Did anything unusual happen?" My mother sighed, wiping her hands on her apron. "There are things best left in the past, Lucas. Sometimes it's easier not to dig too deep." But I pressed on, determined. "Please, Mom, I need to know. Was there something that happened?" After a long, tense silence, she finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "There was an incident, an awful fire that destroyed your great-grandmother's house in 1967. It was tragic, and many believed it was more than just an accident." My heart pounded in my chest. The fire, it was a piece of the puzzle I hadn't considered. "What do you mean? What happened?" She hesitated again, as if weighing her words carefully. "There were rumors. Some said it was caused by a family dispute. Others believed it was something darker. There was a lot of pain surrounding that event, Lucas. It changed our family forever." As the pieces began to fall into place in my mind, I felt a weight settle on my shoulders. The shadow in the photographs, I was convinced it was connected to the fire. I needed to dig deeper, to draw a map of our family's tragedies, to understand the legacy of pain that seemed to haunt us. With this newfound determination, I enrolled in a genealogy workshop, hoping to uncover more about my family's past. It was there that I met Molly. She was vibrant and charismatic, with a spark in her eye that drew me in. As we shared our stories, I learned that she, too, had a history marked by tragedy. "Sometimes, it feels like our families are cursed," Molly said, a hint of sadness in her voice, "like we're doomed to repeat the past." I nodded, feeling an instant connection with her. "I found this old album in my grandmother's house. There are these strange shadows in the photos, and I think they might be tied to a fire that happened in my family. I don't know what to make of it." Molly leaned in closer, intrigued. "What if we worked together? We could dig deeper into our family's histories. Who knows what we might uncover?" I felt a rush of excitement. "That's a great idea. We can compare notes and see if there are any connections." As we collaborated, our chemistry blossomed amid the dusty archives and old records. We delved into the past, tracing our ancestors' footsteps and uncovering stories long buried. Yet, with each discovery, I felt a growing tension between us. The more we learned, the more I realized the darkness that lingered in my family's history, and in mine. One afternoon, while sifting through documents at a local history center, we stumbled upon records that spoke of a secret society linked to my ancestors. The words jumped off the page, igniting my curiosity. "Molly, look at this," I exclaimed, pointing to a passage that described a pact made by one of my forebears with a mysterious group. "This could be it. This might be connected to the shadows in the photos." Molly's eyes widened. "What kind of pact? Do you think it has anything to do with the fire? Maybe the shadow is part of the consequence of that deal." I nodded, my heart racing. "It has to be. We need to find out more about this group and what they did." As we spoke with an elderly staff member at the center, she leaned in, her voice low and conspiratorial. "You know, dear, there have always been whispers about that pact. They say it brought a curse upon the family, a series of tragedies that never seemed to end. Many tried to escape it, but it always found them." The weight of her words hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. My mind raced as I processed this revelation. A curse? Could that be what I was experiencing? The shadows in the photographs, the growing sense of dread. It all began to make a twisted kind of sense. Feeling the pressure of this newfound knowledge, I turned to Molly, my emotions swirling within me. What if I'm not strong enough to face this? What if it's too late for us to change anything? Molly placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Lucas, we can't let fear dictate our lives. If we don't confront the past, it will continue to haunt us. We owe it to ourselves to seek the truth. Her words resonated deep within me, igniting a fire of determination. I had to confront my family's legacy, no matter how daunting it felt. But as I prepared to face the shadows of my past, I also felt an increasing tension between my growing feelings for Molly and the weight of my family's history pressing down on me. With each revelation, the shadows grew longer, and I stood on the precipice of a truth that could change everything. I could feel the pull of my family's past, and I knew I had to find the courage to confront it, not just for myself but for the generations that had come before me. The shadows may have haunted me, but I was determined to shine a light on the darkness that had gripped my family for too long. As I stood in my grandmother's old house, the musty scent of aged wood and dust enveloped me like a warm blanket. I could almost hear the whispers of my family's history echoing through the faded wallpaper. The house had seen better days, but it was still filled with memories. Memories I longed to uncover. As I wandered through the dimly lit rooms, something caught my eye on a high shelf. An old, dusty album. Curiosity ignited within me. I reached for the album, the cover cracked and worn, giving it an aura of nostalgia that pulled me in. As I opened it, the pages creaked softly, revealing a world of sepia-toned photographs. Each image told a story, but one thing stood out. In every single photo, a shadowy figure lingered in the background. The more I flipped through the album, the more that figure sent chills down my spine. It was as if it were watching me, lurking just beyond the edges of each moment captured in time. I paused, my fingers hovering over a photograph of my grandmother in her youth. She was radiant, her smile infectious, but behind her, that ominous shadow loomed, a stark contrast to her brightness. My heart raced as I felt an inexplicable need to understand this figure, to unravel the mystery that seemed intertwined with my family's past. Who or what was that shadow? I knew I had to dig deeper. Days turned into nights as I immersed myself in the annals of my family history, searching for clues that could explain the presence of that shadow. I spent hours combing through old letters, documents, and even talking to distant relatives. But the more I investigated, the more elusive the truth became. It wasn't until I sat down with my mother that a significant piece of the puzzle began to emerge. Mom, do you remember anything strange about Grandma's past? I asked, trying to mask the urgency in my voice. I could see the hesitation in her eyes as she shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Why do you want to know? She responded cautiously. I found something in the old album. Something unsettling, I admitted. Her gaze dropped to the floor, and after a long pause, she finally spoke. There was an incident, an awful fire. It destroyed your great-grandmother's house back in 1967. It was a terrible tragedy. A chill ran through me. The shadow in the photos and the fire. Could they be connected? What happened during the fire? I pressed, my heart pounding with anticipation. It was said that our family had enemies, and some believed it was an act of revenge, she explained, her voice barely above a whisper. But no one really knows for sure. That was it. The shadow, the fire, there had to be a connection. I could feel the threads of my family's tragic history weaving together, forming a tapestry rich with sorrow and unanswered questions. I took a deep breath and began to map out the events that had plagued my family over the years, determined to find the answers that eluded us. It was in the midst of this turmoil that I met Molly. I had signed up for a genealogy workshop, hoping to meet others who shared my passion for uncovering the past. The moment I laid eyes on her, I felt an undeniable connection. Molly was fierce and charismatic, with an air of determination that drew me in. As we exchanged stories about our family histories, I felt a spark between us. What about you? Has your family had any strange occurrences? I asked, hoping for a glimpse into her world. She hesitated for a moment, then replied, "There's always been talk of a family curse. My great-grandmother was said to have dabbled in some dark arts, and ever since, we've had our fair share of tragedies." Intrigued, I shared my discoveries with her, including the shadow that haunted my family's photographs. I feel like there's something deeper at play here, I confessed. It's as if our families are intertwined in some way. Molly nodded, her eyes sparkling with excitement. We should team up. 2 heads are better than 1, right? The chemistry between us was palpable as we dove into our research, our hands brushing occasionally as we sifted through old records. The thrill of discovery made the air around us electric. But with every revelation we uncovered, the tension between us grew. It was as if the very act of seeking the truth was pulling us closer together while also threatening to tear us apart. One day, while exploring a local historical center, we stumbled upon a dusty box filled with old documents. As we sifted through them, I found a letter, elegantly penned in my grandmother's handwriting. My heart raced as I read the words aloud. My dearest love, I know our families will never accept us, but my heart belongs to you, and I will fight for our love, no matter the cost. What do you think happened? Molly asked, her brow furrowed in concern. I don't know, I replied, my voice trembling, but it seems like this love was forbidden, and it led to something tragic. Maybe the shadow is connected to this secret. The realization hit me like a thunderbolt. The shadow, the tragedies, the fire. It all led back to a love that had been shrouded in secrecy and pain. As I pondered this connection, I began to have vivid nightmares. Each night, I was haunted by the figure in the photographs, a dark silhouette that seemed to grow more defined with each passing dream. It stood over me, whispering secrets of the past, filling me with dread and confusion. Molly, I can't shake these nightmares, I confessed one morning, the bags under my eyes betraying my restless nights. It feels as if the shadow is trying to tell me something. Maybe it's a warning, she suggested, her eyes narrowing with concern. Perhaps whatever happened back then is still affecting your family today. As I contemplated her words, I felt a weight settle on my shoulders. The past was not just a collection of stories. It was a living entity that demanded to be confronted. The thought of the shadow lingering over my family filled me with a sense of urgency. I needed to understand the depths of this connection to break the cycle of pain that had haunted us for generations. Driven by a newfound resolve, I began to piece together the fragments of my family's history. Each discovery felt like a step closer to uncovering the truth, but it also deepened the conflict within me. I found myself torn between the desire to confront these ghosts of the past and the longing to escape their grasp. One evening, I sat with Molly, the weight of our findings heavy in the air. I don't know if I can keep doing this, I admitted, my voice strained. I feel like I'm losing myself in all of this. Molly leaned closer, her expression earnest. But we need to confront these ghosts, Lucas. If we don't, they'll continue to haunt us. You can't ignore your family's past. Her words echoed in my mind, igniting a fire within me. I knew I had to confront my own fears, to face the shadows head-on. But as I prepared for the inevitable confrontation, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever awaited me would change everything. The love that had been lost, the sacrifices made, all of it felt like a storm brewing on the horizon, ready to unleash its fury. I had to decide if I would stand and face it or turn away, leaving the past to fester in the shadows. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the landscape, Molly and I stood before the remnants of what used to be my great-grandmother's house. The charred remains of the structure were barely distinguishable from the surrounding earth. Nature had reclaimed the space, but the scars of the past lingered like ghosts in the air. "This is it?" I murmured, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. "This is where it all happened." Molly stepped closer to me, her presence a comforting balm against the chill of the evening air. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, her eyes searching mine. "Yeah, I didn't expect it to feel so empty." I took a deep breath, attempting to steady my racing heart. "I thought maybe I'd feel something, some kind of connection. Sometimes the absence speaks louder than the presence," she replied, her voice measured. "Let's look around. Maybe we can find something that'll help us understand what happened here." We began our exploration of the site, each step crunching on the gravel and ash beneath our feet. I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming mix of dread and curiosity. What had my family gone through? What had they lost? "Look at this!" Molly exclaimed, kneeling down and brushing her fingers over something half buried in the dirt. "Is this?" I leaned in closer, my breath hitching in my throat. It was a stone, intricately carved with symbols I didn't recognize. "It must be part of the house," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But these symbols, they look ancient." Molly's brow furrowed as she examined the stone. "Maybe they're connected to the pact you mentioned. Could it be a clue?" As she traced the symbols with her fingertips, I felt a shiver run down my spine. "I hope so. It's like a piece of the puzzle we've been missing." Suddenly, the air around us shifted. A cold breeze swept through, causing my skin to prickle. I glanced around, half expecting to see something lurking in the shadows. "Did you feel that?" I asked, my voice tight. Molly nodded, her eyes wide. "Yeah, it's like the past is trying to reach out to us." I swallowed hard, feeling a sense of apprehension wash over me. "Do you think we're being watched?" "Maybe," she replied, her expression resolute. "But we can't turn back now. We're here for a reason." With renewed determination, we continued to inspect the area. The setting sun cast long shadows, and as darkness began to encroach upon us, I felt a strange pull toward the stone. It was as if it held some kind of energy, a whisper of the history that had unfolded here. "Molly, do you think we should take the stone?" I asked, glancing at her. "It might help us learn more about the pact." "I think we should," she replied thoughtfully. "But we need to be careful. We don't know what kind of power it might hold." I nodded, feeling both excited and anxious. Together, we carefully pried the stone from the earth, the weight of it heavy in my hands. As I lifted it, a surge of energy coursed through me, and I stumbled back slightly, startled. "Whoa, are you okay?" Molly asked, concern etched on her face. "Yeah, I just felt something," I admitted, shaking off the sensation. "It was like a jolt. What if this stone is tied to the shadow we've seen in the photos? Then we need to figure out what it means," she said, her voice firm. "We can't let fear hold us back now." We made our way back to my car, the stone resting in my lap as I drove. The weight of it felt significant, almost like a burden. I glanced at Molly, who was staring out the window, lost in thought. "Molly," I said, breaking the silence, "what if we're in over our heads? What if we shouldn't be messing with this?" She turned to me, her expression unwavering. "We're already in this deep, Lucas. Ignoring it won't make it go away. We need to confront it together, no matter how scary it is." I appreciated her bravery, but doubts clouded my mind. What if we stirred something we couldn't control? What if the shadows we sought to understand turned out to be more than mere memories? When we arrived at my apartment, I set the stone down on the table, the dim light casting eerie shadows across its surface. Molly and I sat across from each other, the air thick with anticipation. "Let's look at the symbols," she suggested, pulling out her laptop. "We might find something online that can help us decipher them." As she typed furiously, I leaned back in my chair, staring at the stone. The symbols seemed to dance before my eyes, shifting and changing, as if alive. I felt a sense of urgency building within me, a need to uncover the truth. But at what cost? "Here," Molly exclaimed, breaking my reverie. "I found a website that talks about ancient pacts and their symbols. They're often associated with sacrifices to appease spirits." My heart raced at her words. Sacrifices? What kind of sacrifices? Some pacts require a life, while others might demand something less drastic, like an offering of sorts, she explained, her eyes wide with intrigue. "But it always comes with a price." A chill washed over me. What if the price is something we can't afford to pay? Then we need to be smart about this. We can't just dive in without knowing what we're dealing with, she replied, her voice steady. "But we have to at least try to break this cycle of pain in your family." I nodded, torn between fear and determination. "You're right. We owe it to my family to find out the truth." After hours of research, we pieced together fragments of information about the pact. It became clear that the shadow, the figure haunting the photographs, was a manifestation of the consequences of that pact, a lingering reminder of the pain and suffering it had wrought upon my family. As we spoke late into the night, I felt a connection growing between us, a bond forged in the fires of our shared experience. But beneath that connection lay an undercurrent of tension. There was something unspoken hanging between us, an awareness of the stakes involved. "Lucas," Molly said, her voice breaking through my thoughts, "what if we find out that the only way to break the curse is to make a sacrifice? Are you prepared for that?" I looked into her eyes, searching for an answer that I didn't have. "I don't know, Molly. I want to help my family, but I don't want to lose everything that matters to me in the process." She reached across the table, placing her hand over mine. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together. We've come too far to turn back now." Her touch sent a jolt of electricity through me, and for a moment, I felt a sense of clarity. But just as quickly, doubt crept back in. The weight of the stone felt heavier than ever, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the precipice of something monumental, something that could change everything. As I lay in bed that night, the shadows danced across the walls, and I couldn't help but think of the figure lurking behind my grandmother in those old photographs. Was it a part of my past that I needed to confront, or a part of me that I needed to let go? The line between love and sacrifice, between family and freedom, began to blur, and I felt as if I was being pulled in two different directions. Everything was about to change, and I could only hope that whatever lay ahead would lead to a resolution, not just for my family, but for me and Molly as well. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the ground as I sat on the edge of my bed, staring out the window. The events of the past few weeks had transformed my life into a whirlwind of discoveries, fears, and unresolved conflicts. The truth about my family's history felt like a heavy weight on my chest, suffocating and relentless. I could almost hear the whispers of the shadow from the album, lingering just beyond my consciousness, urging me to delve deeper, to confront the past. But as much as I felt drawn to it, I also felt the pull of my current life, the life I had built outside the shadows of my family's tragedies. Molly's laughter echoed in my mind, a sound that had become so familiar and comforting. She was a breath of fresh air amidst the suffocating darkness of my family's history. Our shared quest for answers had sparked an undeniable chemistry between us, but the more we uncovered, the more I found myself torn between two worlds. I could feel my heart tugging in different directions, and it was becoming increasingly difficult to navigate. My phone buzzed on the bedside table, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a message from my girlfriend, Sarah. Asterisk, "Hey, are we still on for dinner tonight?" Asterisk, her cheerful tone made me smile, but the warmth quickly faded as I recalled the heaviness of my hidden struggles. I had been distant lately, consumed by the past, and I knew it was affecting our relationship. I typed a quick response, asterisk, "Yeah, I'll be there. Looking forward to it." Asterisk, but even as I sent it, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. How could I enjoy a dinner with Sarah when I was wrestling with shadows from a past I barely understood? As if sensing my internal conflict, a knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. It was my mother, her expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Lucas, can we talk for a minute?" "Sure, Mom." I gestured for her to come in, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. She sat down beside me, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "You've been quiet lately. Is everything okay?" I hesitated, the words caught in my throat. "I've just been thinking a lot about family stuff. You know, the photos and the stories." Her brow furrowed, and I could see the reluctance in her eyes. "It's a heavy burden, Lucas. Sometimes it's better to let the past rest." "But what if it's not just in the past?" I shot back, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "What if there's something we need to confront? Something that could help us understand why things happened the way they did?" She sighed, rubbing her temples as if trying to relieve a headache. "I understand your curiosity, but there are things that are better left undiscovered. Trust me." "Trust you?" I scoffed. You've been avoiding the truth for years. I need to know what happened. I feel like I'm being haunted by this shadow, and I can't just ignore it. Lucas, please, she said, her voice rising in urgency. You don't understand the consequences of digging too deep. Some things are better left buried. Like the fire, like the pact. I pressed, my voice thick with emotion. What are you so afraid of? She looked away, unable to meet my gaze. It's not about fear. It's about protecting you. I don't want you to suffer like those before you. Her words hung in the air, heavy and oppressive. I could feel the weight of generations resting on my shoulders, and I desperately wanted to break free from it. I can't live in the dark anymore, Mom. I need to know what's going on, and I need your help. Help? She repeated, incredulous. You think I can help you with this? I've spent my life trying to forget. Maybe it's time to stop running away. I shot back, my frustration boiling over. Maybe it's time to face the truth, no matter how painful it is. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the wooden floor. Lucas, you're being reckless. You don't know what you're asking for. I watched her leave, a sense of defeat washing over me. The conversation had only deepened the chasm between us, and I felt more isolated than ever. I understood her fear, but I couldn't shake the feeling that if I didn't confront this darkness, it would consume me. I grabbed my phone again, considering texting Molly to vent my frustrations. But instead, I scrolled through our previous messages, recalling our conversations filled with laughter and shared discoveries. I could picture her smile, the way it lit up her face when we uncovered something new about our families. It was intoxicating, yet dangerous, and I couldn't help but wonder if I was playing with fire. After a moment of deliberation, I typed a quick message. Asterisk, hey, can we meet up later? Asterisk, I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Molly responded almost immediately. Asterisk, of course, is everything okay? Asterisk, asterisk. Not really, but I need to talk. Asterisk, asterisk. I'll be there in an hour. Asterisk, I took a deep breath, the anticipation mingling with anxiety. I needed someone to share my burden with, someone who could understand the weight of the past without judgment. As I paced my room, I tried to gather my thoughts, to articulate what was weighing on my mind. When Molly arrived, her presence filled the room with warmth. Hey, she said gently, her eyes searching mine for answers. What's going on? I gestured for her to sit, my heart racing. I had a conversation with my mom. It didn't go well. She's so adamant about burying the past, and I can't do that. I need to know the truth. Molly nodded, her expression empathetic. I get that. It's hard when family history feels like a weight. But you have to remember that not everyone is ready to confront those things. I know, I replied, running a hand through my hair, but it feels like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff, and I'm being pulled in two directions. I want to dig deeper, but I also don't want to lose what I have right now. Like your relationship with Sarah? She asked, her voice gentle yet probing. Exactly, I admitted, my heart heavy. I care about her, but I can't shake the feeling that if I don't face this, it'll keep haunting me. And I don't want to drag her into this mess. You're already in it, Lucas, Molly said softly, and it's okay to feel torn. You don't have to have all the answers right now. But what if I lose everything? I whispered, my voice barely audible. Molly reached out, placing her hand over mine. You won't lose everything. You have me here, and we can face this together. Just take it one step at a time. Her touch sent a shiver down my spine, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of hope amidst the turmoil. I just don't know how to balance it all, I confessed. The past, the present, Sarah, it's overwhelming. Then let's tackle it together, she said, her determination shining through. We can keep researching, find out what really happened. And when you're ready to talk to Sarah, we'll figure that out too. I nodded slowly, grateful for her support. I appreciate that, Molly. I really do. The conversation shifted, and we began brainstorming our next steps in the investigation. We discussed the symbols we had found, the stories we had uncovered, and how they might connect to the shadow in the album. Each revelation seemed to deepen our bond, but the underlying tension remained, an unspoken acknowledgement of the complexities we were both navigating. As we wrapped up our discussion, a sudden wave of anxiety washed over me. What if I find something that changes everything? What if it's too much for me to handle? Molly leaned closer, her eyes unwavering. You're stronger than you think, Lucas, and you don't have to face it alone. We'll take it slow, and if it gets too heavy, we'll figure it out together. Her words were a balm to my frayed nerves, and I felt a sense of clarity, an understanding that I didn't have to bear this burden alone. But as the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that with each step we took into the past, the stakes grew higher. As I walked Molly to the door, the weight of uncertainty settled over me again. Thanks for being here, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Always, she replied, her gaze steady. Just remember, whatever happens, you're not alone in this. After she left, I sat in the silence of my room, grappling with the choices before me. The shadows loomed larger than ever, but I couldn't deny the flicker of light that Molly had brought into my life. And as I reflected on my relationship with Sarah, I realized that I needed to confront my fears, to bridge the gap between the past and the present before it consumed me. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversations that lay ahead. I was ready to face the storm, but I couldn't ignore the gnawing doubt that whispered in the back of my mind. What if confronting the past meant losing everything I held dear? As I stood outside my grandmother's house, a rush of memories flooded my mind. The familiar creaks of the wooden porch and the whispers of the wind through the trees felt like a soft reminder of my childhood. Yet, today, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation and unease. I had been wrestling with questions that haunted me. Questions that stemmed from the mysterious album I had discovered in the attic, filled with photos of my grandmother when she was young, each image tainted by the presence of a shadowy figure lurking behind her. I needed answers, and I hoped my grandmother would be able to provide them. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open, the hinges protesting with a low groan. The scent of aging wood and faint lavender, her signature fragrance, enveloped me as I stepped inside. My grandmother was seated in her favorite armchair, a patchwork of colors that had seen better days. She looked up from her knitting, her eyes a blend of warmth and caution. "Lucas, dear, it's so good to see you," she said, her voice a soothing balm against the turmoil in my heart. "Hi, Grandma," I replied, forcing a smile as I settled onto the worn couch across from her. "I wanted to talk to you about something important." She put down her knitting needles and turned her full attention to me. "What's on your mind?" I hesitated, the weight of my thoughts pressing down on me. "I found an old album in the attic. It has pictures of you when you were younger, but there's something strange in them, a shadow, a figure that keeps appearing behind you. I need to know what it is." Her expression shifted, the light in her eyes dimming slightly as she absorbed my words. "Oh, Lucas, sometimes the past is best left undisturbed," she murmured, a hint of sorrow threading through her voice. "Grandma, please," I urged, my heart racing. "I can't just leave it alone. I feel like it's connected to something bigger, something that has haunted our family for generations. You have to tell me." She sighed, her gaze drifting to the window, where the sun cast long shadows across the floor. "The shadows of our past can be heavy, my dear, but if you really want to know, you must be prepared for the truth." "I'm ready," I said, my determination fueling my resolve. "I can handle it." She nodded slowly, her fingers trembling slightly as she picked up her knitting again. "Very well then, the shadow you see in those photos. It represents the consequences of choices made long ago. Choices that have affected our family deeply." "Consequences? What do you mean?" I pressed, leaning forward, desperate for clarity. "There was a time when I was young, much like the girl in those photos. I fell in love with a man my family disapproved of. He was from the wrong side of the tracks, and I was expected to marry someone of status. But love doesn't listen to reason." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, and I felt a pang of empathy for her younger self. Did something happen because of him? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Yes, she said, her voice thick with emotion. My parents found out about our relationship. They were furious. In their anger, they made a pact. A desperate attempt to rid our family of any taint that my love might bring. They believed they could erase the love I felt, erase him from my life completely. A pact, I echoed, the word sending a chill down my spine. What kind of pact? She paused, her gaze distant as if she were lost in the memories of her youth. A pact with forces beyond our understanding. They believed that in exchange for my obedience, they could protect our family from misfortune. But they were wrong. That shadow is a manifestation of their actions, a constant reminder of the love that was denied and the pain that followed. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. What happened to him? To you? I was forced to marry someone else, she said, her voice trembling. Someone who was suitable. But every day after that, I felt the weight of my choices bearing down on me. The shadow grew. There were accidents, tragedies. It seemed that every time I thought we could be free from it, something else would happen. Like what? I pressed, needing to know the details. Your great-grandmother's house burned down in 1967, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. They said it was an accident, but what? I urged, my heart racing. But I always believed it was the shadow's doing. It was a warning, a punishment for my parents' pact. Many in our family have suffered since then, and those who tried to escape it, they paid the price. The weight of her words settled heavily on my shoulders. I could feel the dread creeping into my chest as I tried to process what she was saying. Grandma, do you think this shadow is still affecting us? Is it still here? She looked me directly in the eyes, her gaze piercing. The shadow is a part of us, Lucas. It feeds on our fears, our regrets. It thrives in the darkness of our past. You've begun to uncover it, and that's both brave and dangerous. Brave, I scoffed, frustration bubbling to the surface. I just want to understand. I want to break free from this. You think it's that simple? She asked, her tone sharp. The past is not easily forgotten. It shapes who we are, and it will always be a part of us. If you delve too deep, you may awaken something you cannot control. Then how do I stop it? I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. How do I prevent it from haunting my life, from haunting Molly's life? She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. You must confront the truth, but be prepared to face the consequences. Sometimes the only way to break the cycle is to make amends for the past, to confront the shadow head-on. Make amends, I echoed, the concept swirling in my mind. But how? It won't be easy, she warned. You may have to sacrifice more than you're willing to give. What do you mean? I asked, confusion clouding my thoughts. I cannot tell you what to do, Lucas. You must find your own path. But be aware, the choices you make may lead to more pain or perhaps to liberation. The shadow will not let you go without a fight. I sat back, my mind racing with the implications of her words. The weight of my family's history pressed down on me, suffocating and heavy. I thought of Molly and the bond we were forging, the connection that felt so right amidst the chaos. But now, I wondered if pursuing this truth would only draw her into the darkness with me. Grandma, I finally said, my voice trembling, I don't want to lose anyone else I care about. I don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. She reached out, her frail hand resting on mine. You have the power to choose differently, Lucas. But remember, sometimes love is not enough to shield us from pain. You must be brave in your choices and take responsibility for the consequences, however difficult they may be. As we sat in silence, the weight of her words settled heavily in my heart. I knew that I was standing at a crossroads, teetering between the past and the future. The shadows of my family's history loomed large, but I felt a flicker of determination igniting within me. I had to confront the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Thank you for sharing this with me, Grandma, I said, squeezing her hand gently. I'll do my best to find a way to break this cycle. She smiled softly, a mixture of pride and sorrow in her eyes. Just remember, dear, the choices you make will echo far beyond your own life. Choose wisely. As I left her house that day, I felt a renewed sense of purpose, but also a heavy burden on my shoulders. The shadow was no longer just a distant figure in an old photograph. It was now a living, breathing part of my family's legacy, and I was determined to confront it no matter the cost. As days turned into nights, and the shadows of my family's past grew ever heavier, Molly and I found ourselves sitting in my dimly lit room, surrounded by old books and family photographs. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the very walls were holding their breath, waiting for us to uncover the truth. I could feel the weight of the world pressing down on my shoulders, the burden of generations of secrets and tragedies weighing heavily in my heart. "Lucas," Molly said, her voice steady yet laced with an underlying tension. "We need to decipher those symbols from the stone. I have a feeling they hold the key to breaking this curse." I nodded, unable to shake off the feeling of dread that clung to me. "I know. It's just, what if we find something we're not ready to face?" My voice faltered as I glanced at the photographs of my family on the wall, each one a reminder of the shadows that lurked just beyond the surface of our seemingly normal lives. Molly leaned in closer, her gaze piercing through my uncertainty. "We can't let fear hold us back. If there's a chance to stop this, to free your family from the curse, we have to try." She pulled out her notebook, filled with sketches and notes from our previous research. "Look at this." She pointed to a drawing of the stone's symbols. "They appear to be some kind of ancient script. I think I've seen something similar in my genealogy workshop." Swallowing hard, I leaned over her notes, trying to focus on the task at hand. "Okay, let's see what we can make of it." As we worked together, the light from the desk lamp cast an ethereal glow over the pages, illuminating the words and symbols that seemed to pulse with life. Hours passed as we deciphered the intricate designs, our fingers tracing the lines of the script, revealing the deeper meaning hidden within. The more we uncovered, the more the weight of my family's history crashed down upon me, like a tidal wave threatening to drown us both. "Here," Molly said, her finger stopping on a particularly complex symbol. "This one, it looks like it represents a sacrifice. It's mentioned alongside the word release." She glanced up at me, her eyes wide with realization. "Lucas, this means that in order to break the curse, something or someone must be sacrificed." A chill ran down my spine at the implication. A sacrifice? What kind of sacrifice are we talking about? My voice trembled as I struggled to comprehend the enormity of what we were uncovering. Molly hesitated, her brow furrowing. "I don't know, but if this is true, it could mean that your family has been paying a price for generations. We might need to perform a ritual or something similar to complete the process." I leaned back in my chair, my mind swirling with possibilities and consequences. What if the sacrifice is something we're not willing to give up? What if it's me? The thought sent a shiver through my bones, igniting a flicker of fear deep within me. "Don't say that," Molly replied, her voice firm yet compassionate. "We can't jump to conclusions. We need to understand the full context before making any decisions. But we have to prepare ourselves for the possibility." The weight of her words hung in the air, and I could feel my heart racing as I contemplated the path ahead. What if it's not just a sacrifice? What if it's something more? Something that could change everything for us? I felt a knot forming in my stomach, the uncertainty gnawing at me. "Then we'll face it together," Molly said, her determination shining through. "We've come this far and we can't turn back now. We owe it to your family to see this through." She reached across the table, taking my hand in hers, grounding me in the moment. As the night wore on, we continued to analyze the symbols, piecing together a narrative that felt both ancient and immediate. The more we delved into the past, the more intertwined our fates seemed to become. I could see the flicker of fear in Molly's eyes mirrored in my own, as we both grappled with the implications of what we had discovered. "Lucas," she said softly, breaking the silence that had settled over us. "What if we do this ritual and it doesn't work? What if it makes things worse?" Her voice trembled slightly, revealing a vulnerability I hadn't seen before. I squeezed her hand, trying to offer comfort even as my own doubts swirled. I don't know, but we can't let fear dictate our choices. We need to confront this, whether we like it or not. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the revelation that awaited us. Molly nodded, her expression resolute. Then we need to find out exactly what this sacrifice entails. We should look for more clues in the records we've gathered. There might be something that gives us more insight. As we pored over the notes and documents, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the precipice of something monumental. Each piece of information felt like a thread, weaving a tapestry of my family's past that was both beautiful and terrifying. Finally, we stumbled upon an old journal entry from a distant relative, buried among the stacks of papers. My heart raced as I scanned the faded ink. "Listen to this," I said, reading aloud. The pact was made under the light of the full moon, a binding agreement that required a sacrifice to appease the spirits who had been wronged. The price would be heavy, and the consequences dire, but those who dared to defy it would face an even darker fate. Molly's eyes widened as she listened intently. "This sounds like it's not just about your family. It's about something larger, something that has been carried through generations." I continued, my voice steady despite the quaking in my chest. "It speaks of a life for a life, a notion that chills me to the bone. It's not just a sacrifice, it's a life-altering decision." Molly looked at me, her expression somber. "Lucas, we need to think this through. If there's a chance to break the curse, it might be worth the risk, but we have to be prepared for the consequences." I nodded, the weight of her words resonating deep within me. "I get that, but what if it means losing everything? My family, my life as I know it, even you." The thought of losing Molly, of letting her slip from my grasp, sent a pang of despair through me. "We can't think like that," she said firmly, her grip tightening on my hand. "We need to focus on what we can do to change the course of your family's history. If there's a chance to break the cycle, we owe it to your ancestors and ourselves to try." As we continued to piece together the fragments of my family's legacy, I felt a sense of urgency building within me. The shadows that had haunted my family for generations were closing in, and I realized that the only way to confront them was to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. "We should prepare for the ritual," I said, my voice steadying as determination took hold. "If we're going to confront this curse, we need to do it right." Molly nodded, her features set with resolve. "Then let's gather everything we need. We'll make a plan, and together, we'll face whatever comes next." As we worked late into the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were teetering on the edge of a precipice, ready to plunge into the darkness of the unknown. But I also felt a flicker of hope igniting deep within me. A hope that perhaps, just perhaps, we could rewrite the narrative of my family's past and break the chains that had bound us for so long. With every symbol we deciphered and every secret we unearthed, the shadows began to shift, revealing a path forward. I knew that the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but as long as Molly and I faced it together, I believed we could confront the darkness of our past and emerge victorious. As night descended like a heavy cloak, I stood at the edge of the clearing where the remnants of my family's past lingered like a ghost. The air was thick with anticipation and dread, a concoction that made my heart race and my palms sweat. The stone with the strange symbols lay before me, illuminated by the flickering light of the candles we had arranged in a circle. I could feel Molly's presence beside me, her eyes wide and reflective, mirroring the turmoil that churned within me. "Are you sure about this, Lucas?" she asked, her voice low but steady, breaking the silence that hung heavily between us. I turned to her, searching for reassurance in her gaze, but all I found was concern. The weight of our shared discoveries pressed down on me, but the gravity of this moment felt like a weight far greater than any I had ever known. "I have to do this," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper, yet resolute. "It's the only way to put an end to this curse that's haunted my family for generations." My heart raced as I recalled the stories my grandmother shared about the shadow, the consequences of the choices made in the name of love, choices that had led to suffering, loss, and despair. Molly stepped closer, her hand brushing against mine, grounding me momentarily. But what if it doesn't work? What if you lose everything in the process? You've already sacrificed so much already. Her concern was palpable, and I could see the fear reflected in her eyes. I can't just sit back and let this shadow continue to haunt me. I need to confront it, I insisted, feeling the urgency of the moment coursing through my veins. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows around us, and I could almost hear the whispers of my ancestors urging me forward. She nodded slowly, though I could see the hesitation in her posture. I'll be right here with you, no matter what happens. Her words warmed me, even as trepidation gnawed at my insides. We both understood that this ritual could change everything, or it could seal our fates in ways we could not yet comprehend. I took a deep breath and faced the stone again, the symbols etched into its surface pulsing with energy. "Let's begin," I said, forcing my voice to steady. We had prepared for this moment, gathering artifacts from my family's past and the few remnants that survived the fire that had decimated my grandmother's childhood home. Each item was a piece of the puzzle, a thread in the tapestry of our family's history. As I began reciting the words from the old texts we had unearthed, I felt a shift in the atmosphere. The air thickened, crackling with energy, and the shadows around us began to twist and turn, coiling like serpents hungry for release. I could hear the whispers, low and haunting, rising from the ground beneath me, calling my name, beckoning me to step into the darkness. "Lucas," Molly murmured, her voice trembling slightly. "Are you feeling that? It's like something is trying to break through." I nodded, swallowing hard as I continued the incantation. "I know. Just stay focused." My heart pounded in my chest as the shadows coalesced, forming a figure, a dark silhouette that flickered at the edge of my vision. I felt Molly flinch beside me, but I couldn't take my eyes off the growing shape. "Show yourself," I commanded, my voice echoing through the clearing. The shadows twisted and morphed until, before me, stood a figure that sent chills racing down my spine. It was a grotesque version of my grandmother, her face contorted in anguish and rage, eyes glowing with a malevolent light. "Lucas," she whispered, her voice an eerie echo of my own. "You've come to confront your past, but do you understand the cost?" I took a step back, my heart hammering in my chest. "What do you want from me?" "I'm here to break the curse." She laughed, a sound that sent a shiver through my bones. "Break the curse? You think you can escape your fate? The shadow is part of you now, woven into the very fabric of your being. It will not let you go so easily." "No!" I shouted, desperation bubbling to the surface. "I will not be a prisoner of this family's mistakes. I refuse to let it define me." The shadow of my grandmother stepped closer, her form flickering like a flame caught in a breeze. "You carry the burden of our choices, Lucas. Every decision has a consequence. Your love, your desire to break free, it will cost you dearly." Molly's hand tightened around mine, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Lucas, we can find another way. We don't have to do this." But the weight of my ancestors' sorrow hung heavy on my shoulders. "I have to know the truth," I insisted, my voice breaking. "What must I sacrifice to end this?" The shadow seemed to ripple at my words, a wicked smile spreading across its face. "To break the cycle, you must sacrifice your happiness. You must abandon everything you hold dear." "No!" I shouted, the realization hitting me like a punch to the gut. "You want me to choose between my family and my future?" "Yes," she replied, her voice a chilling whisper. "You must choose." I felt the ground shift beneath me, the weight of her words pressing down, suffocating me. All the moments I had spent with Molly, the laughter, the dreams we had woven together, they flashed before my eyes, beautiful and fleeting. I could see her smile, the way her eyes sparkled with joy, and the way she believed in a future for us. "What if I refuse?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Then the cycle will continue," she warned, her tone low and foreboding. "Your family will remain shackled to the past, and you will be nothing but a vessel for their pain. I looked at Molly, her expression torn between fear and determination. I can't lose you, Molly. I won't. You're everything to me. But what if this is the only way? She countered, her voice thick with emotion. What if sacrificing your happiness is what's needed to finally free your family? The conflict raged within me, a tempest of love and obligation. If I chose to sacrifice my happiness, I could save my family from the darkness. But at what cost? I could feel the shadow of my grandmother looming over me, pressing down with the weight of generations of regret and sorrow. Lucas, the shadow whispered, her voice dripping with bitterness. You must make a choice, your happiness or your family's freedom. Which will it be? I closed my eyes, feeling tears slip down my cheeks. The weight of the decision crushed me, and I felt the darkness creeping in, threatening to engulf me. I can't do it, I finally admitted, my voice shaking. I can't choose. I won't sacrifice my love for you. The shadow flickered, anger radiating from it like heat from a flame. Then you seal your fate. In that moment, I felt the ground shift beneath me, and the shadows surged forward, wrapping around me like chains. I gasped, feeling their cold grasp tighten, pulling me deeper into the darkness. No, Molly, I cried out, reaching for her as despair washed over me. Lucas, she screamed, her voice laced with panic, but the shadows were relentless, pulling me further away from her grasp. I felt her presence slipping away, the warmth of her love fading into the cold void. Please, I begged, but my voice was drowned by the cacophony of whispers, the voices of my ancestors echoing around me, taunting me with the choices I had made. In that moment, I understood the weight of my lineage, the burdens passed down through generations. I had become a vessel for their pain, a continuation of their tragedies. I felt the shadows closing in, wrapping around my heart and squeezing until I could barely breathe. As the darkness consumed me, I realized that I had sacrificed not just my happiness but my future. I had chosen to confront the past, only to be swallowed whole by its ghosts. And in that tragic acceptance, I understood that the cycle would continue, and the shadow would remain, haunting me with the choices I could never take back. The last thing I saw before the darkness enveloped me was Molly's face, her eyes filled with tears and heartbreak, and I knew that I had let her down. The love I had fought so hard to protect had slipped through my fingers, and the shadow of my family's past would continue to loom over me, an eternal reminder of the sacrifice I was forced to make. I had chosen my family, but in doing so, I had lost everything I held dear.